Hello, my name is Danny Nowlan and I'm the Director of ChassisSim Technologies. In this tutorial, we're going to discuss how to get going with ChassisSim online simulation. Now, you might be thinking, okay, what is ChassisSim online simulation and how is it different to the standard versions of ChassisSim? Well, the only real difference is that you're using exactly the same thing that professional race car teams are using, in particular with ChassisSim Elite Online. It is the full version of ChassisSim. The only difference is you just need to be connected to the internet to use it because you're using as a pay by simulation basis. So the point of this tutorial is we're going to talk to you about how you go about setting it up and how you go through and establish your initial baseline model. Now, just some initial points of interest for what you're going to need to do. I would strongly recommend that you go to the ChassisSim blog and read through the articles and the videos on the blog. In particular, the very first article on the ChassisSim blog discusses what you need to do to measure up your race car. So really have a look at that and have a look at those tutorials, because this is going to make the whole process for you really simple. Okay, that being said, why don't we get started in setting up ChassisSim Elite Online and what you need to do. Okay, so first things first, first things first. Upon registering for ChassisSim Elite Online, we're going to give you a link to download the ChassisSim version 3.14 Elite Online software. And you can see I've already downloaded it here. So, and for the sake of this demonstration, I've put it into C drive, but in reality, you can put it anywhere that you wish. So, what you now do is you double click on the install shield, and it'll start to walk you through the install process. Now, I've already installed this, so I don't need to redo it. But for those of you running Windows Vista or above, you're going to get prompted. Please let this program make the necessary adjustments to your computer. You click on yes, and away it goes. So I'll just click on cancel here, and we want to exit the install shield, and lo and behold, it'll install this icon on your desktop, ChassisSim version 3.14 Elite Online. So we just double click that. Now, because this needs to communicate with the internet, you're going to be asked a question to allow this to talk to the internet. So you allow it, and what we'll do is we'll save this as a permanent rule, because in reality, all that we're really doing with the Elite Online version, when it talks to the internet, all it's doing is it's basically accessing the ChassisSim online simulation server, just simply to check how many simulations you've got left. That's all it is doing. There are no personal details being communicated whatsoever. So in that regards, you're completely safe. So we'll click on OK. And what we'll do is we'll just do that again. We'll just do that again. We'll double click here. And what we need to do now is, usually when you start up, you'll be prompted for an online login. But if that doesn't come up, you just simply go to File, Online Login. And what you do is that when you've registered for the online simulation, you'll typically register with your user email and a password. Now, 99 times out of 100, that password will actually be ChassisSim unless you've actually directly registered for the online simulation. So what we'll do is we'll register for the online simulation. We'll basically use this login address. The password is XXXXXX. We'll click on OK. And you can see here that when you've logged on, you'll see this, you will see an initial logged on thing come up, as you've just seen, and we're now good to go. Now, typically when you're starting, what I would recommend is once you've measured up your race car, basically what we need to do is we're going to the process we're going to walk through is we're going to basically create your car using one of the ChassisSim templates. Now, to access a template, you'll see here on the left hand side of the screen, we've got car, And you'll see right now we've got the A1GP demo template loaded. So let's just say for the sake of the argument, you'll see here I've got a whole different bunch of cars that we can choose from here. And the whole idea is that we choose the car that's most appropriate or most closely resembles your race car. Because make no mistake, there are no prizes for doing it the hardest possible way. Yes, you can go through, create a car from complete scratch and build it up manually. But you know what? It's the same thing. I can hammer a nail into a piece of wood using just my hand. There's just one small problem. It'll take 10 times as long, and it's going to be a complete mess at the end of it. So what we're going to do is let's just select, let's just say we're measuring up a mainspring Formula 3 car. So I'm going to start off on the Dallara F310 template, and I'll click on OK. So that basically has loaded in my template. So what I now do is, now what a ChassisSim template is it's basically you've loaded a car file, and you can see here that if I switch ChassisSim into light mode, you can see here I've got a whole bunch of different bar and spring options, like a whole bar of different bar and spring options I can choose from. Now, what I'll do is I'll just toggle back into standard mode for just a tick. So what we now need to do is we now need to save this car file in a particular directory that actually represents your car file. So I'm just going to go to File, Save As, and you'll see here I'm just going to click on the ChassisSim Technologies folder. And I'm just going to, and as you can see here, I've got a folder created already called Models. And you'll see here I've got a folder set up called Dallara F310. I'm just going to set up another folder in here called My F3 Car. And I'll just double click on that. And I'm just going to save this as My F3 Car with today's date. And I click on Save. And what that does is think of a ChassisSim car file like a Microsoft Word or an Excel document. What we're doing is we're basically saving our particular car model and setup within within that particular car file. We'll talk. There's another tutorial on the ChassisSim YouTube channel and on the blog where we talk in particular about what a ChassisSim template is and how to use it, and I'd refer you to that. So now that we've got that particular car file saved, what we would do is we would go through, look at our setup sheet, and we would start changing springs to our particular requirements. So what I might just do, just to make my life a little bit easier, I'm just going to go select units to use, and I'm just going to change the spring rate for the units into pounds force per inch. And the other thing I'm going to do here is I'll change the geometry length to millimeters. You can see here you've got a whole different bunch of options you can play with. So I'll just click on OK. So that's just really just some management. So now what I do is, now that I've got my particular car file saved, I can now just go through and start to modify it. So let's just say, for the sake of the argument, I've got a 900-pound spring at the front. Let's just say I just want to change that to an 800-pound spring. Then I take a look at my bump rubber, and you can see here, if I needed to change the bump rubber, I would go through and basically change the properties here. For example, if the spring deflection was actually 2.3 mil, I would change this to 2.3 mil, and I would go through and make my necessary adjustment. Ditto with my damper adjustments as well. So I click on OK. If I need to change things like my engine, for instance, I simply click on the engine, and I would change the rev limits as I would need. And as I'm doing this, I'm all the time going to File, Save, or I'm clicking on this little save icon here. So and if I need to change geometry, I simply click on the wishbones for geometry, click here to adjust the points. And what I'll do is I'll basically modify I'll simply modify what the geometry options are. Let's just say that for point 1, I just want to move up that Z point to say 185. I'll just simply click on Analyze Configuration just to make sure I haven't done anything silly. I'll just click on Apply, click on OK, and when I'm done, and as I'm going on saving, I just simply click on File, Save, and I'm good to go. Now, what I like to do is I'll put in my initial setup, And then what I like to do is just to double check my model is just to double check my model is okay. What I'll actually do is if what I'll actually do is I'll choose one of the default tracks from the ChassisSim circuit pull down menu. Now, this is basically just to double check to make sure the model's breathing all right, that it's not doing anything it's not doing anything silly. So for the sake of the argument, I'm just going to choose Eastern Creek and I'll click on OK. So the whole point of doing this is just remember the biggest job you're going to do when you're setting up an initial simulation run isn't so much getting the model perfect right out of the box. Perfection can come later. Your number one priority when you've put in all your initial parameters is to make sure that the model is breathing. Once the model is up and running and it's breathing, you can just make little adjustments at a time. Think of the vehicle modeling process as very much similar to a sculpting process. You start up with a big block of with a big block of rock, and you just chip away at the bits that don't look right. And before you know it, you've got a very, very powerful vehicle model at your fingertips. So what we now do is we click on we now click on the start button, and we click on start simulation. And now this is basically going through and doing our simulation. Why do we do this? As I said before, this is just a simple QA check just to make sure that the model is doing what it should be doing. And this is actually really, really important because it does two things. Number one, it double checks that there isn't any problems that you need to look at. But more importantly, what it does is it gives you confidence that you're actually doing the right thing. And in this game, it's actually a very, very important. In this game, it's actually a very, very important process. So we're about to finish our first simulation run. That's our simulated lap, and we click on View Results. And this just basically gives us a quick, and the first thing I do is I just like to look at a plot window just to make sure the lap time plot is sensible. As I said, we are not looking for perfection here. We're just making sure that things are making sense. The model isn't doing anything silly. I'll have a quick look at the track map just to make sure that's okay. And then when I'm done with that, I click on OK. So you're now done with your first simulation. Now, if you wanted to be anal about it, you could have gone to the simulate menu and set up a data logging run. But I pretty much leave that to your discretion. So, if you follow through that step, congratulations. You've just set up your first ChassisSim model. Now, before we conclude the tutorial, I want to point out a few resources that you're going to find really, really useful. Now, you'll notice here that when you install ChassisSim, a folder will be created called ChassisSim Technology. So let's just open that. And in here, we've got ChassisSim version 3.14. But more importantly, you'll see here that there's a help menu. This is an absolute lifesaver, this help menu, because in this help menu, there's a lot of different PDF documents that there's a lot of PDF documents that will really, really help you out. And I just want to point out a few of them to you. First things first, the first PDF file I want you to read is ChassisSim What that discusses is how you go about creating something in ChassisSim called the monster file. The monster file is an export of all the relevant data you'll need to create a vehicle model from a single flying lap of data. This is really, really important. And this is something that I think is a skill that you've really got to master to use ChassisSim properly. The better your monster file is, the better results you're going to be getting from ChassisSim. Once you're through the monster file, once you're through the monster file creation, your next step is basically to look at basically your quick is to basically look at your quick start documentation. So that's either covered in the Lite incarnation in ChassisSim Lite quick start, or in your ChassisSim cookbook. So that'll just walk you through what you need to do to get what you need to do to get going. For those of you who require the standard quick start, that's just simply that is simply an email away. Once we've walked through the quick start, I'd really encourage you to look at ChassisSim modeling in minutes. And what that does is that walks you through how to use the monster file to basically set up your basic tire and arrow parameters. When you're done with done with that, I would then really encourage you to look at ChassisSim your ChassisSim track creation documentation. That will walk you through what's involved in putting together a curvature file and and a bump profile. Once you're done with that, you're pretty much good to go. The other thing I would really encourage you to do, for those of you that are for those of you who I would really encourage you to, I would really encourage you to go to YouTube and look at the ChassisSim channel. This is a collection of video tutorials, discussion points that's really going to help you get the most out of ChassisSim. Because what this does is it walks through an awful lot of what we discussed in the PDFs, but more importantly, we show you how to do it, and this is really, really handy. Another really handy, another very, very useful feature, a very useful resource for you to use is the ChassisSim blog. If you click on the blog, you'll see a whole series of articles here, like for example, how to use lap time simulation properly, that really that has a PDF document in particular about really the appropriate use and about how to use ChassisSim. We also too, to go through the older posts, you can click on here. We talk about things like, for example, how to use things such as the Tire Force modeling toolbox. So basically, these are all resources that are there at your fingertips. So best of luck with your simulations. You're going to find that one of the things that we have found, when you use ChassisSim, it will transform the way you engineer a race car. This is the power that you've got at your fingertips, and with a tool such as Elite Online, you can use it at a very, very cost-effective at a very, very cost-effective rate. So, happy simulating.